all right, we haven't done one of these panels in a while, but it happened. I got these two together, Lalo Dagach, Gad Saad. The internet's going to crack. This could be it. This could be the ending of the internet.
This is it.
Getting you two together. People are going to be very excited.
Shit, the unholy trinity is finally together.
The unholy trinity is finally together. So I guess the most natural way to start this thing is that we have found ourselves in the last 8 months or so really in a huge battle of ideas, which is everything that I've made this show to be. And both of you guys have played a huge role in my evolution and my ability and desire to be part of this thing. And I like to think I've maybe played a little role in yours as well. Did you ever think that you were going to be part of something like this? I'll throw that to you first because you come from the furthest away.
I do, yeah. Furthest away, both in distance and probably as far as any kind of following, because I wanted to be part of the conversation, at least on Twitter. And it's, there's the people who have some following themselves, people who have a larger voice, and then there are the people who just follow them and comment between each other. I at least wanted to be part of that conversation just because I felt there was something really wrong in the conversation. We're just throwing out labels like it's nothing.
Yeah.
But I guess, yeah, it's good that that I had enough voice to be sitting here with you guys now.
Yeah. So there he is, sitting in Chile, going, I see something wrong on the left, and I want to be part of it. Now you, a professor in Canada, again, I did not know who you were a year ago. Hadn't read your books yet, sorry. You know?
I hope you've rectified this problem.
They've all been rectified, and now you've given me an autographed copy, so they'll be double read. But completely different walk of life, right? A Christian Palestinian atheist, a Jewish atheist from Lebanese, now in Canada.
Walk into a bar.
Right. You became part of this thing too. When was your moment that you really thought you had to be part of this discussion?
So it started when I would see what I call the Ostrich Brigade mentality, where you would see the incredible increase in the Islamization, in my case in Montreal, and where you try to engage people to discuss some of these issues, and people were simply unwilling to tackle what was as clear as the existence of gravity.
Yeah.
And that's probably the impetus of what got me into this whole thing.
So were you seeing it literally in real life before you were seeing it online? What were you seeing in Montreal?
So for example, I'll just give you one of many possible examples. Yeah. Until about 2003, so I spent 2 years here at UC Irvine, and then we went back to Montreal. I had probably seen a single woman in my entire life in Montreal since the mid-'70s wearing any Islamic garb. It just never happened. From 2003 to today, there are many areas in Montreal where you could walk around where 20, 30, 40% of the women are dressed in this garb. Now you might say, well, who cares, so what? But that's symptomatic of other issues that are also happening, right? Mm-hmm. And so trying to engage people to discuss these types of issues, as I have on my show, for example, was a very difficult thing to do because everybody had their head deeply buried in the sand.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of buried in the sand, I mean, I was part of the progressive world for a long time. I mean, I was deeply in it, deeper than you guys probably.
Have you atoned for your sins?
I don't think there's enough atoning that can ever be done. I'm trying every day.
But I think I was really happy to be, just be a liberal, be a progressive, like, somewhat 20 years ago. We seemed like very strong on the left, and we knew very clearly that a lot of problems in society derived from religion. Mm-hmm. And it seemed like the left was very happy to call out the Christian left and say, well, there's problems in the Bible, evolution is not being taught to children, homophobia, the fight against gay marriage is principally from many, Mormon churches or whatever.
Sure.
But what triggered me, is the right words, is now that we are having the same fight about Islam and majority Muslim states and groups, that it was our group, our side, the liberal, the progressive, that said, no, what you're saying now is considered racism, or no, we can't have that.
Yeah.
And that's what at least pushed me over the edge to really, okay, no, I feel like I have to do this because I can't let my group, this good group, go off the edge, you know? And the worst part is that now the word racist and bigot is used in such a damaging way like nothing. And I think that is really liberal kryptonite. It's like we're so strong, it's like the Superman kind of character. Yeah. We have so much going for us. but our weakness is being called racist. That's the last thing any of us want to be called. And they know it, and they use it.
They use it, but just last week, I mean, one of my former colleagues publicly called me a bigot on Twitter, and it's like, my reaction, I swear to you, my reaction was, I thought it was funny. I was like, this is all you got.
Yeah.
Another one of former colleagues called me a bigot recently on Twitter after being on here.
I think it was the same person. But so does that show right there that we are winning this thing? Right. And I'm hesitant to say it because there's still a lot of work that has to be done, for sure. But there has been an awakening. We see it just in the social media. It feels like we live in a social media world more than reality. Isn't this weird? I mean, this is the first time we're sitting down together.
And frankly, I mean, not just having gotten a chance to meet you, and I should thank you for offering voices like ours an opportunity to flourish in such an important medium. But the number of lovely people that I've met online, I mean, yes, of course, there are some bad guys, but just a number of people that I will probably never have the pleasure of meeting in person, but who've written to me really personal stuff that I actually take the time to read and respond. And so to answer your earlier question, what got me into this, more generally, I'm a guy about ideas. I'm a guy about connecting. And now you're giving me all these tools to connect to thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people. Mm-hmm. I'm a kid in a candy store. And so it becomes very difficult to extricate myself from this world because it feeds my desire to connect with people and discuss ideas.
Yeah, that's interesting because I've seen a big change in the tone of what's going on Twitter particularly. And everyone's talking about how they're struggling financially right now and the business model's not making sense. And it sounds like they're starting, they took away Milo Yiannopoulos' verified check, which, it sounds silly, right? Yeah. Like in and of itself, it doesn't sound like anything that great. I have mine and I pray that they never take it away from me. But they're taking a punitive action on someone just because they don't like what he says.
Right.
So if they didn't really like what he says, then they could have suspended him for a day if he had violated the terms of service. But instead they did something very petty, and then it caused his influence to only grow more. Yeah. And I feel like that's very indicative of what this authoritarian left and this regressive thing is all about. They keep trying to trick you into thinking they're doing something good, and at the same time, they're really doing something pretty terrible.
No, go ahead.
Have you heard of who's heading the Truth and Safety Council of Twitter?
Well, I know there's like 30 people on there, but one is
the one
Sarkeesian, right?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Anita Sarkeesian is one of the one, and I went after her. I did a Sad Truth clip where I demonstrated how outlandish her content analysis of video games are in terms of the means by which she analyzes the content to then arrive at the conclusion that it's all patriarchal oppression. I mean, wouldn't pass the most minimal test of scientific rigor. Mm-hmm. And yet she's the one who's now going to decide whether what you say or not is appropriate. It's horrible.
Yeah. I think the most important thing to me out of anything we talk about, out of atheism or science, is freedom of speech. And I think you've made that so clear on this show that you're willing to talk with anyone and let all voices be heard. And to me, that's everything. Because I can't even, like Gad Saad said, I'm about ideas. And also not just giving ideas, but the absorption of ideas. I want to hear even the craziest ideas out there and see what I think about it. But when people are censored, what they're telling me is like, this idea is so bad, Lalo, you can't hear this. I've decided this for you. Yeah. Aren't you happy? Aren't you so glad I filtered ideas for you? No. And to me, even if, as far as my opposition to many Muslim ideas, but back in, what year was this, when there was the Ground Zero Mosque, mm-hmm. right, close to where the towers fell, I actually had an argument with a lot of people I knew who thought it was an affront to New York and to the people, and I fought against a lot of people, and they were surprised by my position. I was like, no, people have a right to their faith and to practice if they want, not as far as that I'm for it or I agree with it, but people have freedom of speech, they have freedom of practice. But now in universities, what Gad Saad is that people are saying like, no, well, if it offends somebody, if a person is hurt, a person of a background like me and Gad, it's like those are the people's feelings they want to protect. Essentially, right. God's feelings, my feelings, and say, oh, Lalo, you're so delicate. Aren't you happy? I'm a white person, and I am worried about your feelings as a brown man.
Can you be clear? Yeah. It's because you guys are a little browner than me.
A little brown.
Right? He's a little browner than you, and you're a little browner than me.
Yeah. And I'm fatter than both of you, so again, I always win.
Like, I'm a little balder than both of you. So.
I'm really losing this thing then. Yeah, well, that's why the debate and what's gone on Twitter especially, I found lately that I feel like my interactions on there don't hold as much value as they did. Like I think now, 6 months ago, it was actually a really special time when I was connecting with all of these people, and even today I still connect with all these people that have come on my show or from all over the world. But I do find there's something strange is happening, and we've talked about this a little bit, that within this community of fighters and free thinkers and secularists, that it's one thing if you're one of these people and you live, in the Middle East and you're truly oppressed, but we're finding more and more that a huge percentage of people that are free thinkers and secular people and atheists are anonymous and they're living in the West.
Right.
This is a huge problem, and it actually takes value away from the conversations with me. I'm tired of talking to people that are anonymous if you live in the comforts of the West. It's not like the three of us are the bravest motherfuckers on the planet.
Right.
We're just people. And I want people to step up.
Didn't you had, is it Lubna Ahmed?
So I had Lubna, and actually I'm glad you brought it up because the long story short of it is we've had to take the interview down for now, and we are...
For safety concerns.
For safety concerns, which I had done, I assure you both and the audience that I did my due diligence in terms of discussing with the right people, should we even do this or any of that. I can't say much more right now, but you haven't heard the last of her.
But think. I mean, we're talking about...
But Bravery, yeah.
Right, and about, the influence that is afforded to us by engaging in this medium. Lubna wrote to me privately very early to solicit my advice as to what to do and so on. And I took that with quite a bit of humility. Here's this woman I know what she's going through. And yet, very, very quickly, she's on your show. I mean, that's the whole thing, right? The possibility to bring to light what these people are experiencing in these horrible environments.
Well, that's the irony, is that the same week that I'm being attacked by a former colleague who I never had one disagreement with ever, the same week that this person's calling me a bigot, I'm actually talking to someone that is trying to stand up for all the right liberal values.
Right.
And I'm still, I can't get into it much further, but I'm still dealing with some of that stuff and trying to help her. And it's like, that's the disconnect.
Right.
I have nothing against anyone that is Muslim, more than I would have anything against anyone that's Christian or Jewish or Jainist or whatever. But we have to help people to be able to express the same liberal values that we want everyone else to express. And the three of us, for some reason, aren't afraid of that.
Well,
and our friends on the left seem to be petrified.
So to build on what you just said, I've received comments from people who said the fact that I share my personal history to the extent that it makes some Muslims look bad, then I am a bad person. So I don't have right of ownership of my own personal history, right? Keep quiet about what happened to you in Lebanon, because don't you know that by speaking about it, you are stigmatizing these people. So my being executed, potentially, is stigmatizing the other. So it's become a truly perverse form of thinking.
Yeah, for the people that want to know more about that, just watch the interview that the one-on-one that I just did with you, where you...
I heard well-known regressive Glenn Greenwald talking about this once, that he thinks the best people to talk about these subjects are people in Muslim-majority states. And it doesn't make sense for a straight white male in the US or in Europe to be speaking about this. One of the reasons I got into this was reading the writings of Raif Badawi, in Saudi Arabia, a guy who, if there's some translations of his blog online, and it's just wonderful stuff about secularism, progressing his own society. And he gets arrested for simply blogging and talking about secularism and gets flogged for it, gets whipped. And if I have that freedom, he doesn't. So when we talk about these subjects, we can do it with the freedom that those people in those societies don't have. And there's many ways to do it. One is to talk about it ourselves. One is to address certain opponents of that. The other is to give them a voice, like you've been doing. But even that is incredibly complicated. That you had a whole drama with Lubna, putting up her video, then changing it to just sound, then taking it all down because of her safety, because of saying something online. In the societies we come from, Canada, the U.S., and Chile, that's unthinkable.
Right.
It would never happen.
And that's why when Glenn says something like you just said, when he says, well, we have to let them deal with it, you're throwing them to the wolves.
Right.
Not only are you throwing them to the wolves, you're throwing your own ideals to the wolves. I don't care what color, religion, anyone is, but I will stand up for the basic principles that we talk about here all the time.
Imagine if he had said that, 30 years ago about the gay community in the US. Why should I, as a straight white person, talk about the struggles of gay individuals?
Yeah.
why not let them talk about it in their own community? No, it means a lot that people outside of that community talk about it. It does. If they have a freedom to talk about it, it reflects a tolerance. There's a lot of good reasons why it should come from outside the community.
Yeah.
Sadly, from on the other side, I've received criticism for engaging moderate Muslim voices. So as you know, I've had a lot of these folks on my show, and including, I haven't had yet Tariq Fatah, but he'd be amongst that group. And people who are very much against engagement with Muslims are like, why are you doing this, right? So you really see what happens when people are very dogmatic in their positions. They lose the capacity to reason, whether it be on one side or the other.
Right, so it's really, and that's why, Milo Yiannopoulos mentioned this to me, and I've really taken this idea and run with it, but that it's really about totalitarians. It's really about authoritarians versus free thinkers.
Right.
Because what you're saying is, if you have, or if I had Majid Nawaz on, well, now some people that are actually racist or bigoted or whatever are going to say, you shouldn't have this Muslim on, right?
Exactly.
Okay, now that's real bigotry. And then people on the left will say, you found your porch monkey, and we know that's not my phrase.
Right.
That's actually someone well-known. What's his name on the left? You
Can I point out where the little story behind that? Glenn Greenwald wrote a couple years ago an article about Sam Harris, something with the title Islamophobia, talking about Islamophobia. He mentions right in the first paragraph Murtaza Hussein and Nathan Lee. And both these guys have said racial slurs against Majid Nawaz.
Yeah.
Now, Glenn Greenwald, did he call out those guys for saying something against? No, it's very selective. Now, has Sam Harris ever said a racial slur against any Muslim? Never.
Not that we know of.
Not that we know of.
Yeah. So what do we do with all this? That's why I think I've ended most of my discussions about all this. Like, what do we do? Because as I asked you previously, there's a certain amount of energy that goes into this. Sam described it as an opportunity cost when he went on Real Time to discuss his book, Waking Up, which was a guide to spirituality without religion. That whole tour about inner peace was hijacked by your gross racist.
By the tornado of Ben Affleck.
Yeah, so literally the worst possible thing that could have happened. So what do you guys do in terms of energy and all that? Like, it's a lot to put into this, right?
Go ahead.
Thank you. It is, especially, I'm sure we're all very busy, but I have oftentimes an 18-hour day career as a professor. But you know what? It's too important. I talk about the tragedy of the commons, and maybe I could take 2 seconds to explain it. Tragedy of the commons is an economic phenomenon where, let's suppose you've got a plot of land and you've got 10 farmers, all of whom are using their livestock to graze the land. And if they keep grazing the land won't be able to survive. And so they come to a gentleman agreement where they say, for the next 2 years, nobody's going to graze the land. Now, the tragedy of the commons happens where each of the farmers says, well, what if I cheat and I allow my livestock to graze this land? Hopefully the other 9 will be honorable and everybody wins. I get to graze the land and the others will be kind. The problem is that everybody thinks that, and then they screw it up. Well, to draw the analogy here, what happens is that everybody thinks that somebody else should get involved in this debate, right? I'm busy today with my kids. I'm busy buying tomatoes and the groceries. Let Dave Rubin worry about this. Let Lalo worry about this. I'm too busy with my life. No, everybody has to be engaged, and that's how you resolve it. From having the big platform that you have to people talking about it in parties. Not everybody has Dave Rubin's platform.
But ironically, I only got the platform because I was talking about it.
Well, exactly.
That's the truth.
And look, it's trench war. It's trench war of ideas, right? It happens everywhere. It happens at the bar. It happens at the party. It happens in the classroom. Just be engaged. That's how you win the battle. If you always think that somebody else will fight that fight for you, we will lose.
Yeah, so when it comes to these people that are anonymous online, so you were originally anonymous, right? Or your Twitter handle, your Twitter handle had your name, but you were known as Chili's Atheist, and
it was just the name was Chili's Atheist, but my handle was always Lalo Dagach.
Right.
I actually had to sit down with my family and talk about whether I was going to use my name, because I was going to talk about Islam, and that's not really a subject that, especially having my last name, Dagach, is not a typical last name even for Chile or anywhere.
Yeah.
So that comes with a cost. But a lot of people are anonymous online, but it does come down to the support they give us. and they have to do their part too.
Yeah.
But like God said, they don't all have time for this. They don't all have time to go into the depths. So, for example, Reza Aslan, who you were talking about before, has that CNN interview where he's about FGM and discarding it and everything. Well, not everybody kind of knows he's dishonest. They've seen a lot of bits and pieces of it, but we can take the time to discredit a lot of things. We can say when he says FGM or female genital mutilation is just an African problem, we can say, no, there's actually evidence that it exists in Iraq and even as far as Indonesia.
Yeah, a huge story just came out about it.
Or he says that in Indonesia, women are 100% equal to men when there's child marriage, there's FGM, there are morality police throughout cities. He makes a bunch of other claims that in terms of female genital mutilation, that since it exists in other Christian states in Africa, therefore it is not associated to Islam. Now, if you thought about Judaism, circumcision is not only done by Jews, it is also done by Christians. Does this mean it has no connection to Judaism? Of course not, right? But see, people need to have that understanding. Yeah. I put that on Twitter, I put that in a video. People knew, okay, this sounds like something's wrong with this. But we can say that. Yeah. We have certain resources and time to say this. God has, resources and the background academically to say that. And a lot of these people need that. Yeah. They don't have they have their lives, they have their work. There's a cost of going online publicly with their name, where they work. Who knows who their boss is. But they can still give support as far as they can.
Yeah. Can I just to add to this? I mean, there's a real professional cost. Never mind personal safety costs to my taking the position that I do, right? Because the typical phenomenally tepid, cowardly university might look at my stuff and while they should be encouraged by the things that I say, might say, well, this guy is too vociferous, right? Yeah. And so I take a lot of professional risks in speaking out openly, right? I mean, maybe University X that might have otherwise made me an offer might decide not to, precisely because I speak. But frankly, again, my individual selfish career goals are grossly superseded by the greater battle of ideas. And hence, I'm compelled, I have to speak.
Yeah, what's interesting about that is, in a just world, or if the world wasn't as upside down
I would be rewarded for this.
Well, not only would you be rewarded, but there would be many more people like you, right? There would be many more tenured professors who would be relentlessly saying whatever they wanted, and even if it had nothing to do with this specific topic or free speech, but there would be tons of professors doing this, and yet here we are.
Can I tell you an incredibly banal story about how cowardly people are? There was a colleague of mine who at one point we were chatting about something, and she said, well, I don't really want to take this position openly because, I said, well, why are you afraid? You're tenured. His or her response, let me put it this way.
If this was about going to a party, you should have smacked it.
It was, yeah, but you know what? If I take this position, maybe the departmental chair will give me courses on a Tuesday to teach, and that might coincide with my taking my kid to soccer practice. In other words, his or her capacity to want to be engaged in a particularly important discussion was reduced to whether she gets a teaching assignment on Tuesday or not. Man. When you have this kind of sort of myopic view of big issues, that's not good.